Hey, greetings everyone. Thanks for joining us for this edition of Voice of CIO. We are actually doing the IT Mythbusters. This is episode 4 with my favorite host, Mike Fulton. Thanks, Mike, for joining us today. And how are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful and I'm excited about this topic today, Suresh.
Well, from viewers that we have collected the inputs, we have something very interesting for us to see whether is it a myth or not. So without any further ado, let me tell you that COVID-19 has made us more productive as a professional, as an individual to deliver value. Oh, I don't know how much true it is, but that's the myth. We're going to say whether it is a myth or not, but let's get this ball rolling. So COVID-19 is almost a year. If I look back, Mike, I still remember coming down in March.
Yep, a little bit over, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a good time to do a retrospective and saying that has it made our life a lot more easier, worse, or difficult? So what do you think? What is your thought on
Well,
the?
I think obviously within society, there's been tremendously bad things that have happened as a result of COVID, obviously. But from a standpoint of personal and organizational productivity, I actually think that there's been some positives. I think I would argue that pro COVID has made me more productive.
Well,
And I'll tell you why. I think COVID has given me the ability to engage and interact with people that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to engage and interact with. I'll take this podcast as an example. You and I probably wouldn't have thought to do this podcast if it wasn't for COVID, right? We would have found somebody to do a podcast with that was in the same city, so we could be in the same room to co-host a podcast with, right? Um, I'll point to my personal journey over this last year. I've been involved with um, helping to create a digital executive education program at Ohio State. And I would have never, ever had the time or energy to do that if it wasn't for all of the things that got canceled as a result of COVID, right? I didn't have to go to kids' basketball games and track meets and soccer matches and band concerts and all the other things that I would have normally spent time on. And so I had the opportunity to do a little bit of that. And then even at the office, I had no issues keeping up with the same level of capacity, the same level of work as what I had before. I actually even switched jobs in the middle of COVID and moved from one company to another and was able to do that very successfully. So I think COVID made me more productive. How about you?
well, I hate to break that. It's becoming more difficult because of COVID. I'll have my own share of reasons for it. The first thing that you talked about concerts, you talked about soccer games and other stuff. I missed it so much. I'm a person who likes to go out and recharge my batteries when I go and look out for a concert or a music, right? Or play a game or a sport. Now, this COVID-19 is such a game changer that I'm stuck indoors and
Mm-hmm.
have a lot more screen time, which I hate to do. And for particularly for my things, doing remote sessions where most of the people are behind the cameras, I don't know what they are going to be focusing on. Then they're doing multitasking. And the other aspect is they spend way too much time in doing meetings. For me, the meetings has been one of the most time wasters because what I used to do, just going and meeting you in front of a coffee or just nudging you gently, I have to do at least 2 or 3 meetings to get everybody together. So it increases a lot of more time that is being spent, not being productive. And just because we are all working from home, there's a perception that you can do anytime, anywhere. No, I have my own rules of the game. I have to do things, but people don't pay attention to this. So the other aspect I want you to think seriously about the mental health. The mental health and well-being is gone for a toss because there's a lot of pressure in the way we are handling this situation. Human beings are not destined to be indoors. We are not destined
Okay.
to sit and work. Okay. If you look at the ideal way of working is to go out, walk, and keep on moving, right? We have built in much more obesity. We have actually our bodies taken a toll. Our sleeping patterns have become erratic. So productivity is a factor of all these parameters. So I have seen that this has become worse, and it's not been productive at all, Mike. I know we are doing a lot of things, juggling around, but it's not just helped us to make that balance. I'm not sure whether it's to attribute of COVID or a game that we plan, but that's my view.
I couldn't agree with you more on some of those things. I think there's kind of a new definition of the COVID-19, right? And I think I gained at least 19 pounds throughout COVID, maybe the COVID 38, who knows? But yeah, that's definitely been a real issue, right? You're sitting in front of the screen all day, every day. You just even that act of getting up and walking from one conference room to another inside of a building, and the activity that comes with that. I mean, I think that's definitely a real issue. To your point, the idea of being on 14 Zoom meetings back to back in a day is just exhausting. I do agree with you that a Zoom meeting is many times harder than an in-person meeting. It just is. It takes a lot more energy. It takes a lot more kind of mental alertness to stay focused and pay attention than it does in a face-to-face meeting. And it's exhausting from that standpoint. It is really hard to make it through the day. And I've talked to several folks, right? The thing that you had kind of built in, right, when you were in meetings that you would have to go from conference room to conference room or location to location, right, was that you had a chance to walk the hallways and chat with somebody. You had a chance to have a quick social conversation before the meeting. You had a chance to take that veer left into the restroom for just a minute or two, right? And when you're going from one Zoom to another, when it's click leave, click accept, and you're there, you don't have that same opportunity. And I have found that in my experience, I don't know about your experience, people tend to not be as social on Zoom, right? In a Zoom meeting, you don't get the same kind of small talk before the meeting starts. Everybody just kind of mutes themselves and goes off and does other things until people show up. There's not nearly as much of the same kind of small talk. So I do think that impacts relationships, which is, I think, a big problem long term.
And the other one I think you should also think about is the mental switch down, right? You need to have a time window where you can mentally switch off from work. That has not been possible, Mike. It's been always on the trot to do something. So you're not, at least when you used to work from office, that point of time where fully focused on work, you come out, then you can take a mental break. So there's mental switching off is not there at all, because of which I think you're over processing your brain and the rest of the body, and it's tiring and exhausting, right? So that's one thing that I think productivity. So if you look at the hallmarks of productivity, just breaking down into aspects, one is ability to do things that you do it in a more efficient manner. So I think we are struggling on efficiency.
Yeah.
We are working way more than what we are supposed to work, but the output is not probably helping. There's a little bit of hindsight to it. So we are saving time on commutation. That's all great to do it. But until you have a sense of personal discipline, you cannot entertain calls after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the evening. And you have to put that barrier. And I'm not sure whether we have got that level of um, assertiveness to say no to even your colleagues and peers because it's personal time.
Right.
Productivity requires you to have a sound sleep. I'm not sure whether we are spending that quality of 6 to 8 hours of sleep that requires you to be fully charged to come and deliver it. So your lifestyle is changing. The rules of the games are changing, which you have not adapted, or you're just accommodating everybody just to satisfy them. And our mental health is at stake.
Yeah.
So what's the whole point of productivity? That's
And it's interesting you say that, right? So I'll just do a quick aside. I was watching a show that's popular here in the US called Top Chef.
right.
And they just kicked off their new season. And it's the first season that's kind of dealing with the after effects of COVID. And like a lot of reality shows, they interview people individually. And the last episode of that show, they actually interviewed 3 or 4 of the chefs that were competing, and they all said, I've been drinking a lot more. I've had problems with alcohol
Right.
as a result of dealing with trying to cope with the stress of the pandemic and kind of work through that. So I definitely think there's a lot of factors that go into this conversation. I do want to go back though and mention on the pro side, right? When I was at Nationwide, we actually had developer productivity metrics, and we measured those before COVID, and we measured those throughout COVID, right? And I'd be interesting to go back and see what those numbers are now. I left Nationwide about 6 months ago, so I don't have access to those numbers anymore. But in the first several months of COVID, what they saw was that the productivity metrics for the developers took a dip the first couple of weeks, but they actually came back after about 2 or 3 weeks, and the productivity metrics actually settled in higher than they were before the pandemic. So from a developer perspective, those numbers suggested that it was possible to be even more productive. Now, I think to your point, are we measuring productivity right? Were we accounting for the fact that people might have been working longer hours because they weren't commuting? Were we accounting for the fact that nobody was taking vacations because there was nowhere to go on vacation? You were just going to go hang out on your porch or sit in your living room, right? So I think there's a lot of really, really interesting factors when it comes to trying to measure productivity throughout this pandemic.
Yeah. So I think I agree that there is some benefits about it, but let's kind of get into that crux of it, right? Productivity, the measurement of productivity is very subjective, right? The amount of work that you do efficiently could be productive. I would say that for me, productivity, a day of productivity is when I do the things that I like the most, providing adequate time interval for my health and well-being, emotional recharging, spirituality if I want to follow something, as well as playing a sport. For me, that is a productive day. Productivity is just not about work because that's one part of the whole 8 weeks of life. So for me, it has to be, it just cannot be productive as, and we find it very amusing that we benchmark on productivity. We really want to ace this game. Come on, this is not a game. It's all about your life and how you enjoy the moment of life and truth. So I want to take a step back and say, I don't care damn about productivity. I care about my health and well-being. Am I enjoying what I'm doing, right? And I can be poles apart, but I want you, each and every one of you, to think about, am I enjoying doing what I enjoy? Even that morning coffee, watching the sun and reading a paper was so much for me productive because I felt charged up. So the definition of productivity differs from a person to person. So let's not be so much obsessed with those dimensions of productivity. It's a means to an end. It's not the end by itself. So I don't know why we kind of beat this productivity but that's me ranting, Mike.
Well, I think you've opened my mind here to a different definition of productivity, right? And I think it's a great one. It's not just about work. I mean, you can maybe get more work done for a short period of time, but without all the other aspects that you're talking about being things that you think about when it comes to being productive, it's just a short-term gain for a long-term pain.
Correct.
And I think as I kind of look back and reflect on what you've said, a lot of the things that I talked about me personally being more productive, I would argue it was a short-term gain for what will likely be a long-term pain, because I didn't have a lot of the balance that you're talking about. I didn't have a lot of the mental health aspects of it, and I was missing a lot of those other elements. So yeah, I think you've changed my mind here, Suresh. I think I'm coming down on your side on this one now.
So what do you think? Has COVID made us more productive, or what do you think? Is it a myth? Is this busted? What do you think?
I think this one's busted.
Okay. Now, it's very important for us to understand. Let's take a moment to slow down. It's not worth to run, run, run. What are we trying to prove at the end of the day? It's about holding yourself with that smile that we did all what we could do and enjoy that moment. And that's so important more than anything and everything around productivity. So, viewers, we want every one of you to think this life is not a race to prove someone. It's a celebration, provided you know how to play the game with smile, with gratitude, and embrace everyone in that life with equal sense of taking the balance and making it worthwhile to live in, right? Let's make life magical, right? Sounds philosophical, but I hope you take a little bit of turnaround on this episode of Mythbusters. We want you to stay safe, stay healthy, and of course, in your own words, stay productive.
And Suresh, thank you, because these conversations with you have been magical to me. I've enjoyed them, and they have brightened my day. So thank you for that, and hopefully our audience feels the same way.
Thank you so much, guys, and we hope to see you in the next episode of IT Mythbusters. So keep the conversation going, and we will look into the next episode. Thank you so much.